Now, happy Wednesday afternoon. Welcome to 580 Sports Talk. Brendan Dworzinski, Dan Lucero here with you. 2.5 hours of sports talk coming your way today. We're off a little bit early yet again because of Royals baseball. How about them Kansas City Royals? Smoking the Red Sox. Setting history at Fenway Park. 112 years of Fenway, and the Royals did something no team has ever done before last night. In a good way. Not even in an embarrassing way. It was a good thing. So we'll touch on some Royals baseball coming up later on in the show, looking at some of the history they made last night. And we'll take a look as well in the 4 o'clock hour at a few guys who have been surging offensively in the second half and whether or not it's for real. I mean, literally it's for real. Up to this point, it's happened. But are these things that are repeatable, that we can expect to continue, that we are optimistic about continuing? Or is it just a flash in the pan? So we'll get to that a little bit later on. We will have some Royals coverage to get to coming up this afternoon. We'll also talk Chiefs to lead things off here in just a matter of moments. Some players that Dan and I are keeping a keen eye on during camp this year. Who are the guys that we are focusing on? Why are we paying the most attention to them as well? We've got a trio of players each that we'll break down. Also this hour, we'll hear from Matt Nagy, Chiefs offensive coordinator, and we will get to this week's round of One Gotta Go. We will talk some K-State football and some more realignment coming up in the 4 o'clock hour. Our pal Tim Fitzgerald on vacation this week, so we're trying to find a replacement. We can't replace Fitz, obviously. But
no, irreplaceable.
We have a fill-in for Fitz this week, so we're trying to make sure we can get all the scheduling taken care of, and we will hopefully have someone on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline coming up at the bottom of the 4 o'clock hour. But one way or the other, we'll get to realignment. We'll get to K-State football. That's coming up in the 4 o'clock hour today. Plus, we'll get to what is wrong with you. As I mentioned, plenty of Royals talk in the back half of the show. And, of course, to close things out before 5:30, we've got today's Chiefs training camp report with Mitch Holthus, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Azure Credit Union. Trent McDuffie is the newest feature for this year's training camp reports. One of the standout rookies from last year. So that is coming up later on in the show today. Of course, we will take your text messages. Text line number, you know it, 785-272-9429. And we will take your comments on YouTube as well. Our channel, Sports on 580 WIBW. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the absolute best time to do so. Head to youtube.com. Just search Sports on 580. That's all you need to search. You don't even need to put in the WIBW part. Sports on 580, look it up. You can subscribe to us right from the search menu, and then you can check out all of our video content, including our live video streams of all of our daily shows, which is about to become a single show starting on Monday next week. If you haven't heard the news already this week, we are moving back to one sports talk program here on the Sports Voice of Kansas, 4 hours every day. Yours truly, Dan, Jake Laban as well. The three of us getting the band back together in studio, same time every day, 2 to 6, just like the old days.
The power trio. In the
wait.
annals of Tinker, Evers, and Chance. Oh, my God.
Emerson, Lake, and Palmer.
Sure. I was going to go with Geddy Lee, Neil Peart, and Alex Lifeson.
Yeah.
The power trio from Canada.
Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Sure.
Yeah.
Some of the great lines, some of the great hockey lines in history.
Yep. What are other good trios? That is going to be our open question for the text line and for the YouTube comments today.
It might be our we may save it for our first edition of Everybody Loves a List as a show.
Yeah, we may have to do that. But we'll get to bring that in. How exciting is that going to be?
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
So that is, again, coming up on Monday next week, 2 o'clock, Monday, August 14th, the return of the 4-hour edition of 580 Sports Talk. We're going to have Fulton on the show tomorrow. He's obviously going to be on mic'd up the next 2 days. But we're going to have Fulton for Crosstalk coming up tomorrow for our final Crosstalk in a little over about a year and a quarter or so of our 2-show split. It'll be our final Crosstalk coming up tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
15 months, yeah. So, a year and a quarter is about right, yeah.
Yeah, so big stuff coming up over the next few days. We appreciate you listening then, now, and of course, throughout the future here on 580 Sports Talk. So with that, let's get to the Kansas City Chiefs for today. As we mentioned, we'll hear from Matt Nagy a little bit later on this hour. But a while back, when camp was just starting, we went through a piece that Nate Taylor put together over at The Athletic. Really well put together piece about players who, throughout the offseason, had their stock rise and who had their stock fall. And just given the nature of training camp, that's a good list to start from when you're thinking of who should we be paying attention to, either positively or negatively at camp. Who are some of the guys who will surprise? Who are some of the guys that might break out? And who are some of the guys who might end up down the depth chart or maybe even on the roster bubble? So Dan and I came up with 3 players apiece who we are going to be paying an especially large amount of attention to for one reason or another. My first one, we'll just go here because we talked about him a bunch yesterday. I feel like this is an easy one. It's Justin Ross. And I think this is especially true after what we heard from Mitch Holthus yesterday. Mitch said he thinks it's going to be 6 receivers, and that even that would be a stretch. He said normally we'd go 5, but because of no true fullback, maybe you end up with a 6th wide receiver taking that place. I think you can very easily make an argument you could have 7 receivers on this team this year. So if it's going to be 7, Ross's chances obviously go way up. The percentage chance is probably getting closer to 45, 50%. If it's 6, just based on the numbers game, you're probably looking at below 20%. But if he's that good in camp, if he shows out in the 3 preseason games, if he is killing it in 7-on-7 and team drills and red zone and all of that during camp, he may push. Justin Watson is the name you brought up yesterday, who got a 2-year deal. It's 2 years, $6 million. You cut him, that's nothing. That's an accounting error. You're fine with that. Maybe it's him he pushes. We'll get to Richie James in a little bit. Maybe he has a terrible camp. He ends up on the chopping block since it's a 1-year deal. I don't expect that to happen for what it's worth. I'm just saying I think that's the intrigue with Ross, is that he's obviously got the skill. You have to make sure he stays healthy, because if he doesn't, okay, well, this is pretty easy. Either have him revert to IR after you waive him or you just cut him loose. But I think he is one of the most intriguing pieces in camp because the mixture is there. The ingredients are all there, but can they all come out in that finished product that you idealized, that you originally hoped he could be? If he doesn't make the team, hey, it's a UDFA who in year 2 didn't make the team. In a vacuum, that doesn't mean a whole lot. But I think we've covered he's not really a typical undrafted free agent either. So that's the number one guy for me to see if he really can push for one of those spots.
The thing about Justin Ross is, especially given the camp that he's had, you're not sneaking him in through waivers to your practice squad this time around. Like, you could maybe get away with that last year. I don't think there's any getting away with that this year. If you think that there's anything there with Justin Ross, then you have to make room for him, and you have to put him on your 53. And I think that the buzz is starting to be such that I lean towards that happening for him, which is, again, a surprise to me. Like, as much as I acknowledge that 6'4" is a gift that not a lot of guys in that receiver room have. And as much as I acknowledge that he was unbelievable. Like, if you had asked me to buy stock in Justin Ross after that national championship game in 2019, I would have bought all the Justin Ross stock you were willing to sell me. I would have bought it all. But the injuries, and not just like any nagging injuries, like the uniqueness, the rareness of the injuries that he has dealt with, make him a little less of a sure bet. But if they think there's anything there, and they think that there's even a chance that he can be a part of their future, then he's got to be on the 53-man roster this year, because if he gets waived, somebody's going to pick him up.
By the way, you know who else was on that 2019 Clemson team that won the national title? A certain guy who I believe is the best number 2 wide receiver in the NFL, T. Higgins. Who had more catches for that Clemson team, T. Higgins or Justin Ross?
I think it was Ross.
It was Justin Ross. Now, granted, he had fewer yards per catch. T. Higgins, as a big man, had nearly 1,200 yards and almost 20 yards of reception. But still, that's how important Justin Ross was to the best team in college football this year. And I agree with you about trying to get him through waivers, get him to the practice squad. Like, a team that pops into my mind that has a bad wide receiver room, I think of Chicago, who this year, I mean, it is truly put up or shut up year for their former first-round pick, Justin Fields. And they've done a lot. They got him a true number 1 receiver.
DJ Moore.
They have tried to build a better offensive line. They've got a really strong running game. Their wide receiver room outside of Moore, and I guess if you like Darnell Mooney, still stinks. It's bad. So if you see a guy around the league who Andy Reid and Matt Nagy clearly, well, maybe not Matt Nagy when we're talking about Chicago, but who Andy Reid clearly liked, but was out because of a numbers crunch, and you need pass catchers, a team like that would have a contract offer to him the minute final roster cuts come in. So I agree. I think teams who are either just desperate for pass catchers or have a good enough receiver room that they're willing to take a flyer, I think would absolutely add him to their 53 after cut downs. So I don't think he'll be a practice squad or an IR guy. I'd be shocked if he was, but that's why I think he's so intriguing this year.
Yeah, I think the wide receiver discussion really is interesting because I go back to what Patrick Mahomes said earlier in camp that any one of these guys that he's throwing to, any one of those guys could reasonably make the team. I mean, even outside the guys that we commonly talk about, like Cornell Powell is probably an NFL player and just hasn't gotten that opportunity in Kansas City yet. Amir Smith-Marset has been an NFL player. He probably is an NFL wide receiver. Not like a guy you start, but he would not be out of place on any number of rosters as wide receiver number 4 or wide receiver number 5. And we're not even giving those guys a chance at making this year's roster because the mix, it not only is the mix full of guys who are intriguing for one reason or another or promising for one reason or another, but it's also, okay, how many receivers are you going to keep? Well, if we've already decided they're keeping 4 running backs, which have we decided they're keeping 4 running backs? But it kind of feels like with Deneric Prince, we're leaning in that direction. Well, how many tight ends? Are they going to keep 4 tight ends? Are they going to keep only 3? Maybe they keep 4. Again, we say no fullback. Who's that create an extra spot for? They can't be everybody. I mean, they're not going to carry like 4 defensive backs. Like you can't carry all of these guys. So one guy that I think has really been a little bit lost in the conversation when we have talked about the wide receivers, because we talked obviously at length about Sky Moore yesterday, and we've talked about Rashee Rice because he's interesting because he's a rookie, and goodness knows we've talked obviously just now about Justin Ross. Richie James is a guy who caught 57 balls last year in a very limited passing offense for the Giants. When I went back and I watched some of his highlights, I ate the tape, Brendan. I'm not a tape eater. But I went back and ate a little tape. I went back and watched a little Richie James tape. When the Chiefs lost Juju Smith-Schuster, they lost a guy who was able to work the middle of the field, a big physical body who can do that dirty work underneath and over the middle. And Richie James, you're not going to confuse physically with Juju Smith-Schuster. Like they're not the same kind of player. But a whole lot of Richie James's catches last year are in that middle third of the field, getting open, quick in cuts, drag routes, slants. If he gets matched up against a linebacker, he turns a 5-yard route into 10, 15, 20 yards. That's a skill set Richie James has as an underneath guy in this offense. I think that can be really, really valuable. I don't doubt Richie James is going to make the team, because I think he's going to be a punt return option for them, if not the punt return option for them right out of the gate. So I don't think his place on the team is in any question, but I think we're underrating the impact he could have in the offense. I mean, the guy had 57 catches last year with Daniel Jones throwing to him. Why can't he duplicate that or even be better in a more creative offense and B, with as much of a glow up as any wide receiver could possibly experience, going from working with Daniel Jones to working with Patrick Mahomes?
I'm fascinated by how the Chiefs are going to use him, because are they just going to try to replicate what he did with the Giants last year? Because if that's the case, you can live with that. I mean, that's a useful piece for this offense. It's something that they don't really have other than that. So I think that's useful. But do they try to use some of that shiftiness and speed in a more vertical way? We know the Chiefs like to work the ball vertically. Or is he essentially a check down wide receiver, which you don't think of all that often, but maybe that's where he ends up serving a purpose. A lot of teams, they do the 4 verticals thing. They'll send everybody deep, but then you have the running back run the angle route or break off into the flat. Maybe that's something you do with Richie James instead, and you get more speed than if you did that with Isaiah Pacheco or even a Jerick McKinnon. So I think it's fascinating how they are going to end up using him. The unfortunate thing about the Chiefs in the preseason is, we're never going to have it. We're not going to find out. We will not know until week 1 how they actually plan to use him. The next 2 for me are both defensive players. First one, and I know you heard from him on Mic'd Up earlier today. He spoke at camp. Keondre Coburn, the 6th round pick out of Texas, defensive tackle. He is a wall. He is gigantic, and he moves really well for his size. I think it's the guys over at the KC Sports Network who have been all over him during camp already and have said, man, he moves really well, and he has been really impressive. I believe Nate Taylor wrote about him as one of the impressive guys early in camp. He is not a Chris Jones replacement, okay? They're not the same kind of player. They're certainly not the same size. I don't think Coburn's going to have that kind of pass rushing ability, But you know what he could be? The long-term replacement for Derek Nottie, maybe a souped up version of a guy who we really like in Turk Wharton, or even Colin Saunders to that degree, because he was such a good athlete, who, by the way, had a very funny quote. He called he's now with the Saints, Colin Saunders. He called Brian Breesy, their first round pick, a Gerber baby today. It was very funny. So it's like, yeah, that's what he looks like, which is hilarious. Anywho, like Wharton, we've said, yeah, he's not the strongest. He's maybe not the most skilled, but he offers you a little bit of that secondary interior pass rush. Derek Nottie is a big space-eating body. The Chiefs continue to bring him back. He obviously serves an important purpose for them, but he's not doing anything getting after the quarterback. But what if you had a big dude who did have at least a little bit of juice going after the quarterback? That makes the inside of that line so fearsome that it kind of doesn't matter who you have on the edge. And then if you end up with edges like what Felix can be and what Karlaftis already is, even if he doesn't continue to grow, that's a top 5 at worst defensive line potentially in the NFL if you're able to add that kind of skill. So for me, I think it's possible that by some point this year, DT2 on this team is Keandre Coburn. He's got an uphill climb because now he's been around for a while. Wharton's been around for a while. I get that. But it sounds like he is really impressing. And I'm fascinated to see how he meshes once Chris Jones gets on the field too. Because if you can play them at the same time, or if he's good enough getting after the quarterback that maybe you can add extra beef, you put Chris Jones on the edge for a play or two on third down, you put Wharton or Nottie and Coburn in the middle, there's a lot of unique packages you could run with that group.
It feels like an understudy year for Coburn a little bit to kind of learn at the feet
of
fair. Derek Nottie and Chris Jones eventually, because we're all, again, still operating under the assumption that he's going to show up to camp at some point with a deal or not and play this season for the Chiefs. I think long-term, he probably does replace Nottie in that role, maybe in the next year or two. But yeah, there might be a little bit more athleticism. There might be a little bit more to him than just giant guy to eat 2 blockers against the run, a first down defensive tackle. He might be able to be one of the bigger 3-down guys in the league if the athleticism that he showed at Texas can translate to the NFL. So he's an interesting guy. And again, the Chiefs have done some great work with third-day picks, and they are more interesting as a result because of some of the work they've done on day 3 of the draft. One guy that they got on day 3 of the draft last year is Jalen Watson. And Jalen Watson's been challenged a little bit. He was demoted to the second team earlier in camp. And there was a thought that, hey, maybe his starting role opposite Trent McDuffie on the boundary at corner is maybe a little bit up for grabs. And then one of the guys challenging for that role, Najee Johnson, blew his knee up. So now it becomes more important that Jalen Watson not just be what he showed he could be last year, but also take another step forward. If this defense takes another step forward this year, if it plays like it did in the second half of last season, as McDuffie came back from injury, as Watson got more comfortable, as Karlaftis took another step forward, then this team probably, they probably win another Super Bowl. I'll go ahead and say it. Like, if this defense can be what it was in the second half of last year for a full season, they're going to be the number 1 seed, and they're probably going to win another Super Bowl. Like, that's the ceiling, as we all well know with this group. But a big part of having that ceiling is not just holding what you were from the year before for these young guys, but taking a step forward. And Jalen Watson, the guy, he's been called out on the carpet a little bit already in this camp. Let's see if he responds well to that and takes that step forward on the boundary.
I think the encouraging thing for him is that we have seen him play at a high level before. That is extremely important. And you hope that he is the kind of guy, and the coaches know this better than we do, obviously, but you hope that there are 2 motivating factors that do get him to performing, at least in practice, like we saw him last year. The injury to Najee Johnson, which sucks. No one wants to see that, but you can't change it. Like, he's out for the year. You've got to find a way to replace what we thought Johnson could have been. Can Watson be that guy? And also, maybe he is the kind of guy who can respond well to a call out like that, who responds well to being challenged by his coaching staff. And if it works, then shout out to Spags, shout out to everybody else in the defensive staff coaching room, to Andy Reid for making it happen. I was surprised when we heard, and I think I said this at the time, I was surprised when we heard he had been struggling at camp because I was so impressed by him throughout last season.
Yeah.
So I hope he can turn it around.
And it may not have been like severe struggles. It may just have been, hey, he, slacked off on a rep or two and he needed somebody to send him a message, maybe taking some things for granted. Sometimes you get that with young guys who have experience or have experienced success right out of the gate. Sometimes they need to be refocused a little bit. Maybe it was just a kick in the rear and not a indictment of his play. But I will find out, and I look forward to finding out.
The last one for me, also in the front seven, I'm going with Drew Tranquill, another guy who has had good reports from camp so far. And I remember seeing, and I wish I could tell you who put this out there on Twitter, seeing that he is hitting dudes hard. When they are getting a chance to actually hit, he is hitting. Or in the drills where they got to pull up, it looks like he is about to level dudes. He's playing fast. He's playing loose. Let's not forget, and I remember having this conversation because you and I were in Des Moines. The Chiefs signed Drew Tranquill while we were in Des Moines for the NCAA tournament. And I remember sitting in the media room, and we're sitting next to each other up against the wall, and we asked each other, why did the Chargers re-sign this guy? He's coming off the best year of his career. He was dang good. I mean, he had always been a solid player, but he was coming off the best year of his career. The Chiefs signed him for nothing. And thinking, is something wrong? Like why did this fall into the Chiefs' lap like this? And again, early returns, super positive. So it's intriguing for me. Where does he fall in the rotation? Can he keep it going? I also remember at the time of signing, we questioned, was that a flash in the pan? One really good year compared to 3 okay years. Is that just, he took a little while to get going, or is that more it was somewhat of a fluke and he's going to regress to the mean? Well, if the early returns stay consistent, he is going to see the field a lot this coming year for the Chiefs, which also, and this is more of a long-term play, I think brings the future of that room into question. Because if you're able to say that Drew Tranquill plays as well this year for the Chiefs as he did last year for the Chargers, you've got an established thumper, signal caller linebacker in Nick Bolton, who I still have worries about in pass coverage, but I think showed clear improvement this past year in lateral movement, which is huge for an inside linebacker. You've got to be able to move sideline to sideline these days. Willie Gay, more on him in a minute, who I've loved his game, his physicality, again, that sideline to sideline speed. And he spent a top 3-round pick on Leo Chanel last year, who he played a good amount. He was on the field for some key plays in the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. He was on the field for a lot of key plays in Super Bowl 57, in fact. And then you add in a guy like Tranquill. Tranquill's on a 1-year deal. You know who else is effectively on a 1-year deal? Willie Gay.
Yeah.
So you could say, is Tranquill going to push? Because the Chiefs are not really beholden to, we got to make sure Gay is on the field. We got to keep working. If Tranquill's the better player, both are on expiring contracts, they're just going to play the best one out there. And does that lead you to say maybe Tranquill is going to get a long-term extension? Maybe do they feel like they don't need Willie Gay? Or is this going to be competition where they say, hey, Willie Gay, he's stepping up. That is the thing that's going to encourage him to take his game to the next level like we saw year over year for Nick Bolton. So I think, adding Tranquill makes this, again, one of the better linebacker rooms in the NFL. How many legitimately good linebacker rooms are there? Because that went from being for like 15, really for most of football history, the middle linebacker was a big thing.
It was a glamour position, yeah.
But we went through an era there, Urlacher and Kuechly and Lewis. And they were the stars of defenses. And now it's like, yeah, you're a linebacker. Like, you have to be out there. Mm-hmm. Most teams, Chiefs included, are only running 2 out there most of the time now, or fewer. So the Chiefs have a lot of depth, if nothing else, at that spot. What is the lineup? What is the rotation going to look like with that group if Tranquill continues to play this well?
Championship teams, championship organizations in every sport have a knack for finding the right guy to fill a role that you might not even know needs filling until you see that player fill it. And not only do they find that player a lot, they find it on the open market a lot, and they find it without having to pay a lot for it. Like Drew Tranquill, 1-year deal, pocket change, really, for his contract. And I have a feeling that he's going to make some plays throughout this season. They're going to make people take to their preferred social media and say, how did the rest of the NFL let the Chiefs get their hands on this guy? I really feel like he's going to have that kind of impact where he's going to be noticeable. He's going to make a play or two a game that flip a drive, flip the field, force a punt, that kind of thing. Like I think he's an outstanding player and a really good fit for the Chiefs defense because he's sort of a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
He can play any role in the linebacker spot. So, or that the linebacker spot would be asked to fill. So I like that addition a lot. My third player, and I'll just go through him really quick because we talked about him a little bit the week before last, but Matt Bushman is a guy who I know the Chiefs liked a lot last year and featured him pretty heavily in the last preseason game. And then he got hurt. And that enabled them to keep him on IR. But he's a guy who's had a really good camp, has made a lot of catches. With the age of Blake Bell and the injury concerns of Jody Fortson, the Chiefs move on from one of those guys and give Matt Bushman, a former BYU Cougar, an opportunity. I think that that's an interesting name to follow because it could add another pass-catching dimension to what's already, of course, a strength for the Chiefs, the tight end spot.
Bushman is fascinating to me because we thought it was certainly possible before the injury he was going to make last year's team.
Yeah.
And he was obviously liked well enough to get another chance this year. He's performed really well. We know Andy Reid likes his BYU guys. I'm fascinated by that. The tight end room is... I think it's one of the better rooms on the whole roster, like one of the better units on the entire roster. I mean, you're looking at the offensive line, the tight ends, and then those front seven positions on the defense is some of your strongest, taking out quarterback because, I mean, it's Patrick Mahomes, and who cares after that? But if you end up saying that, hey, we still want to run 4 tight ends, and they'll keep Gray, I think. They'll keep Kelsey, obviously. We think we can move on from Bell because he's older and because we think Bushman can fill that role to a better degree. Jody Fortson's too banged up, so we're just going to move on from him. Whatever it ends up being, again, you're going to have awesome depth at that spot. And maybe you get one step closer to finally running Andy Reid's dream package of putting a running back and 4 tight ends on the line in goal line situations.
Remember, he was a tight ends coach in Green Bay once upon a time in his coaching career. There's a fondness for that position that Andy Reid has.
No doubt about that.
Don't rule it out.
We will hear from Chiefs offensive coordinator Matt Nagy coming up in just a little bit. But first, we'll play some One Gotta Go after this on 580 Sports Talk. You know what time it is. One gotta go on a Wednesday afternoon here on 580 Sports Talk. Mine for today, Dan, though, we're going to do the reverse. You can only keep one. Let's say Brett Yormark, wild boy, great businessman, but occasional wild boy, says, you know what? 17. I loved Phillip Rivers. We're going 17-team league, the Big Rivers League. And we're going to take one of the remaining schools from the Pac-4, 8, 10, 12, whatever you want to call it. So you get one. Washington State, Oregon State, Stanford, or Cal. Who are you bringing in?
Only get. I think Wazoo maybe has the best sports culture of the four.
I would agree with that.
Oregon State is presently the best at football of the four.
I think they're going to be awesome this year, by the way.
Like borderline playoff good. Like
ooh, I like that.
Like somebody's going to emerge out of that league along with USC and be like playoff good.
Yeah.
And maybe it's Washington, maybe it's Utah, maybe it's Oregon State. Like they're excellent. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch.
They're going to play man ball this year, by the way.
Cal is Cal. So they're obviously not them.
Yeah.
This is why Stanford interests me. Stanford interests me because, one, they have done more in football than any of those schools in the last 10, 15 years. So the ceiling exists. Like, it's not like we talked about yesterday. That's the outlier for Stanford, but it's a recent enough outlier that you can say, hey, hire the right guy. Maybe they can make this shake. The other thing, too, is with the non-revenue Olympic sports, Stanford's a monster.
Yeah.
Women's basketball's national champions 2 years ago. We talked about the Olympians that they turn out in track and in swimming, water sports, things like that. Obviously, they've got a terrific baseball and softball tradition. Nice Kennedy playing at KU. Can I interest you in that?
Yes, you absolutely can. 100%.
I think I might lean towards Stanford. I really think I might. Of the four, I might lean in that direction because this is... I don't know how important other people think this is. I don't know how important Brett Yormark thinks this is or the other ADs in the Big 12 think this is. But Stanford wins the Director's Cup every friggin' year. Wouldn't that be a good athletic department to add to your league? If you could make the travel make sense?
Yeah. I think you can make a good argument for 3 of the 4. You cannot for Cal.
No.
You genuinely can't. And if you are a diehard Cal football fan out there or Cal sports fan, I do feel for you because it sucks because you have no institutional support. Your team is in mountains of debt and you stink at a lot of things. Like, I get it. I feel for you. But I think you're right on all counts. I feel like I should abstain because I have too emotional of a tie to one of these other 3 teams to give a totally fair answer to the question. I would love to see either one of the land grants, I think, in the Big 12 because culturally, both in terms of school and in terms of how much you care about sports, especially football, I think they match up so well with the Big 12. I would lean Washington State because it would make my wife happy. So there you go.
Texter from the 785 says Stanford would be pompous, hate that they would there, think that they hate that they were there. I think they would be the new Texas. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think Stanford has institutional arrogance as a university that is probably pretty well deserved. But I don't think they have the institutional arrogance as an athletic department, particularly in the revenue sports, that a school like Texas does. I think that's where they would be a little bit different. And I think now, right now, if you're a Pac-4 school, whatever arrogance you've got, you're just trying to find a lifeboat now.
Yeah.
You're just trying to make sure you don't sink. And so I think there'd be an amount of gratitude that would go along with that. Not wrong about the institutional arrogance, but I think it's more on the academic side than the athletic side with Stanford.
Yeah.
Here is my one gotta go. I only have 3 options today, but it goes back to what we were just discussing before we went to the last break, the tight end spot for the Chiefs. If we assume that Travis Kelce is going to make the team, and we assume that Noah Gray is going to make the team, and let's also assume that the Chiefs keep 4 tight ends. One of these has to go. Blake Bell, Matt Bushman, Jody Fortson.
Man, I think I'm leaning Bell, and it's nothing personal. I like Blake Bell's game, have for a long time. Kansas kid, obviously cool, great story. Cool that he's gotten to win championships with the Chiefs. I don't know, man. I just don't know if you can get younger, if you can get a little cheaper, and I mean, we know Blake Bell's a crazy athlete, but if given the age gap, maybe a little bit more athletic at the spot, I feel like I'd probably lean keeping Bushman over him. I am attached to Jody Fortson. I'm not quite on Fulton's level of attachment to Jody Fortson, but I still believe that there is something in him that the Chiefs don't really have otherwise. Like, just a big tree trunk of a person who you just lob the ball up to in the front of the end zone in the red zone, and he just snags it for a touchdown. I really do believe that is there. And given the different role for Gray, how good Kelsey is, I think you can get a little more creative with that spot. So I'd probably lean keeping Bushman over Bell.
Bell might offer a little more in the blocking realm than either of those other two.
That's
I think it's probably going to come down to a choice between Bushman and Fortson. And if the reports from training camp are to be believed, Bushman's plenty reliable as a pass catcher and pretty similar size to Jody Fortson as well. So the question is, Fortson's done it in the NFL. He's also been very injury prone. Bushman's never done it in the NFL, and he's coming off of a significant enough injury to get IR'd last year. So I think it's kind of between those two. Maybe you lean toward Bushman if you think he can be more reliable and be on the field more. I think that's the thing. I mean, we've been waiting for Jody Fortson. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field in a way that, maybe Bushman would be able to.
I think that's fair. I think Bushman's going to make the team. I'll put that out there now. I think Bushman makes the team. There's a lot of hype behind him right now. We do have to get to a break. Speaking of the Kansas City Chiefs, we'll hear from Matt Nagy, Chiefs offensive coordinator, up next on 580 Sports Talk. Earlier today, Chiefs offensive coordinator Matt Nagy joined a trio of players and spoke at the dais, or at the lectern, I think it technically is at training camp. I think it's a lectern. But regardless, Matt Nagy did speak earlier today. Let's hear what the Chiefs OC, the new guy, just like the old guy, had to say earlier on today.
Listen, what you guys got out of that, and what do you got out of that?
Yeah, Pat's first preseason, I remember a throw he made rolling to the right. It was broken down, scrambled to the right, and ended up throwing one to Demarcus Robinson, to the right. And I remember seeing the guys on the sideline go crazy. And, we were seeing that in training camp. So to be able to see it in the preseason game, everybody always says, well, it's not the regular season, but it's the preseason. But for us, that was pretty special to see. And there was another play before that where we had a post route. I think he hit DeMarcus as well. And we always teach guys top down with the post alerts, and Patrick did it from day one. So it was neat to see.
What's the key to reaching players, right? Like your style, attitude, people, hard coach, players coach. Like what how do you envision yourself? What do you think the key is to reaching players?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think everybody's a little bit different, and in this profession and really in life, it's all about relationships are about trust. And if you can have trust with somebody, regardless of how you do it, I think it can be effective. And communication, just being able to learn different people and styles, and then them know who you are. And I got to experience that in Chicago as a head coach. I mean, you're dealing with a lot of different personalities, and so for me, being able to grow up, in the education world in college, and then take that to coaching, there are different styles. So I think I kind of always talk about just be yourself, be you, and that's how I try to go about it.
Are there different styles within the positions? Do you shift gears from quarterback coach to OC to head coach?
It depends. I don't think it's necessarily the position as much as it is maybe the person, and there might be a little bit of that maybe towards the position. But for the most part, it's about the people and the person, and whether it's coach to player, player to coach, player to player, coach to coach. Everybody's different, but in the end, it circles back to trust, and it circles back to honesty. And I think that's just how I try to go about it.
For evaluation purposes, preseason games a lot better than what you see up here.
Yeah, I think that when you're able to, we throw a lot at them, Adam, in the training camp, a lot of volume. Now we pull back a little bit, and we want to be able to see them now play fast. So you can at times play a little slow in practice, whether you're tired or you're thinking. In the game, they get their game plan and they can roll. So now we can truly evaluate them and see. And then also see, too, there's no scripted periods of cards or knowing it's this defense or that defense. I mean, you're going to go out there, and defenses are usually scaled back as well. But you get to see guys' talent. And this is an opportunity for them. And like we always say, if these games – there's only so many people that can make the roster. And I think Coach Reed does a phenomenal job of explaining to the guys, like, listen, if you don't make this roster, make it hard on us and make it easy for somebody else to pick you up.
How do you focus more in year two?
Again, I think growth within the system of being able to play fast because he knows where to go. He's had the talent. Last year, just learning the offense and now being able to transition to playing faster. And now he'll get more opportunities, and I think he'll do well.
Coaches, some of those guys on the fringe of the roster, do you focus more on like the first team and what they're doing execution wise, or are you looking more down the depth chart at those roster values?
It's everybody. So I mean, with the first team guys, it might be a little bit of something they pick out from the previous year that they want to get better at, and it's sometimes just doing the simple things and making those easy for you to go out there and keep that easy. Because, usually in preseason with the starters, there's not a lot that's going on. It's just them getting back into the flow of getting hit. There's not a lot alive in training camp anymore. So you get tackled, you get hit, it kind of feels good. The other guys, it's about depth and competition, and when you have a roster full of good players, it breeds competition and makes it hard on Coach Reed, on Veach, et cetera. So, guys are going to get opportunities. Now, what are you going to do with it?
Is this offense difficult for a rookie to digest? Any more difficult than any other at the wide receiver position? Kind of to follow up to what Pete said about Sky Moore and maybe Rasheed Rice having.
Sure. I would relate it to this. I would say that the college game right now, because of the no huddle, and there's not a lot of words at all. Like when they do huddle, there's still not a lot, but there's so much no huddle now that when kids get here, you get in a huddle and you hear long words. That's the hard part. If you have veterans that come from other teams, it's just like learning a new language. You got to take what you did before and learn how now we say it. So for the rookies coming in, that's why that first year, it's never really that easy, because the college games. Now we're also transitioning. A lot of teams are transitioning to a lot of the college stuff, because you want to be able to make it easier for those guys as they come in.
Coach, the trend is towards the starting quarterbacks, the big stars not getting a lot of snaps in the preseason. What would you feel comfortable with, and could you see the Chiefs getting that?
I don't know. Coach Reed is somebody that has a method to his madness on the decisions he makes and why he does it. Again, I can use it in my position because I've been there for 4 years as a head coach. You have to make those decisions, and there's a lot of looking back and questions you can question yourself for. But I think what's great about Coach is once he makes that decision on whatever that is, hey, the starters are playing X amount of plays and then they're done. That's what it is. It's easy as an assistant coach to be able to roll with that. And so, again, I think a lot of the guys like to get in there and play just to kind of get that feel and get hit again. And I think it's a Coach Reed's been very successful with that kind of stuff in his career, and he's a creature of habit.
Couple more. Do you want to know if the opponents you're going to be playing against opponents 1s or 2s?
No, you know what? We don't really care about that. You can go back and see with the history of some of these defensive coordinators, head coaches, et cetera. You can see usually what they do in previous years. Yeah, their starters were playing, or no, their starters weren't playing. And then regardless, for us, there are a lot of spots out there. So we're looking at the inside linebacker, the DB, the corner, the safety. It's not so much numbers. We're not necessarily game plan. I don't think many teams game plan so much anymore.
Last word, Sam.
You mentioned one
Speak
more
up,
thing,
Sam.
colleges. Do you mean just in terms of terminology or something?
Yeah, the terminology. I wouldn't say the terminology as much as just no huddle. A lot of these kids, a lot of offenses right now are no huddle. So when these kids come here, they have to learn how to get in a huddle, how to listen to what the words that speak to you are. When you go line up, where to go. And then we have a bunch of conversions and assignments, alignments, adjustments within one play, within 40 seconds that these guys got to react to. It's not just going out and just playing fast and, getting 115 plays in a game. We're averaging 65 to 70. So that's the part that's a little bit different to them.
Good stuff from Matt Nagy, Chiefs offensive coordinator. I'm not going to lie. It is kind of weird that he's the offensive coordinator again. It's going to take a while for me to get used to that. Anything particularly interesting from Nagy today?
A lot of coach speak,
right?
It's kind of that portion of training camp, to be honest with you. What's out to you?
I think for me, it is the willingness to be more flexible. I think it is the willingness to say, hey, look, there's a lot going on in the college game we're going to incorporate. There's a lot going on around the NFL that we're going to try to incorporate, while also sticking through with what the Chiefs' offensive principles have been. Because realistically, if you're looking at this team and what they've accomplished during the Mahomes-Reed era, why would you want to change a whole lot? I think it is important to stay ahead of the curve and saying, hey, look, we're bringing in these guys from college who we expect to be contributors pretty quickly. Why don't we add a little bit more that they are comfortable with, which will, A, maybe just bring us to a new place offensively where we can produce at an even higher rate, or an even more effective rate, I guess, and also just help them come along a little bit more. And I think of that specifically like with our conversations about Sky Moore yesterday, that, hey, he did something in college, then did barely any of that all season with the Chiefs, and it turned into a lot of, well, dang, is he actually any good? Now I think if you're saying, hey, maybe some of the stuff we do with our offensive line, maybe some of the stuff we do with our wide receivers, a la Rashee Rice, maybe if we make it look a little bit more like the college game, they're going to acclimate a little bit quicker. They're going to be more effective players a little bit quicker. So I appreciate the openness, and that's not just Nagy, that's the whole staff, but I at least appreciate that, and hopefully it works out too. We've got an hour and a half left on 580 Sports Talk today. We'll lead off the 4 o'clock hour with some Kansas City Royals chatter. That's right, the Royals with a blowout win over the Red Sox. That leads off next hour on 580 Sports Talk. now it's time for the 4 o'clock hour of 580 Sports Talk. Brendan Dwazinski, Dan Lucero here with you. Up until 5:30 today, we've got Royals baseball coming up after that. Pregame at 5:30, first pitch at 6:10 from Fenway Park. That's all the Boston accent I'll give you. I promise.
No, I tried to do one last week. It was horrendous. I immediately apologized to everyone involved.
You know, it's tough for me as a native Midwesterner because I don't have an accent. I just have the way American English is supposed to sound. So it's hard for me to really do someone else's accent.
You don't have the stereotypical, like, really flattened Chicago accent that a lot of people do.
Yeah, the extreme. I've got some nasal. I don't have a lot of the real nasally stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think I have an accent, but I know I obviously do. I feel like you, for the most part, have the Midwestern accent. I know Colorado's not the Midwest.
Yes, Colorado adamantly not the Midwest.
Right.
But yeah, don't lump us in with Iowa. Don't lump us in with them. But no, I've never really thought that I had much of an accent. I moved around quite a bit. I lived pretty much my entire adult life in the neighboring states.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, all of my adult life in the neighboring states to Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas. So whatever my dialect sounds like is probably influenced by that. But I don't think I don't have like a twang. I don't have any like real nasally, like upper Midwestern. I talk how I talk.
Yeah, no, I feel that. Now you go to any other part of the country, that's where the weird language comes in. That's where the people have accents, not us. Those people do. Although I will say, I've told you this before, and my wife does the same thing. I think it's you, my wife, and everybody I've ever met from the city of Wichita all say the word folks with the L. Folks. No one else I know says folks, but the two of you and everyone I know from Sedgwick County say it like that.
I don't know. I don't think that's specific to Sedgwick County. I only lived there for a year and a half, but no, I've always said folks.
Yeah, it's always folks. I know it's not, phonetically like that.
Well,
but...
I mean, I went to college in Indiana and I still heard it as folks.
Well, okay, maybe Indiana. Maybe people in Indiana say it. That wouldn't surprise me. Because Greencastle is south of Indy, right?
West
of Indy. Okay.
Pretty much due west.
Due
it's
west.
Right there.
Okay.
It's right there on 70.
Well, as I said the other day, you go anywhere south of Chicago and Illinois, you're pretty much in like rural Mississippi. So Indiana is very similar.
The Mason-Dixon line starts like 10 miles south of Guaranteed Rate Field.
Yeah, it's pretty much Kankakee. Like that's the difference between the south and the north, if we're being completely honest with you. But coming up this hour, we are going to talk a little Royals baseball. A few guys, to be specific, who have really been tearing the cover off the ball, relatively speaking anyway, over the last few weeks. Is it for real, or is this a flash in the pan? We'll tell you who it is. We'll give you our ideas, our thoughts on those players here in just a few minutes. We will also get to today's What Is Wrong With You, brought to you by Top City Metal Supply. And we're still working on getting someone on the line to talk a little K-State later on. Tim Fitzgerald on vacation this week. We're still working to get that. We will talk some K-State. We'll talk a little realignment regardless coming up at the bottom of this hour. Your texts are still welcome, 785-272-9429. And, of course, your comments on YouTube. Sports on 580 WIBW is the name of the channel. Christopher on YouTube says, how do you pronounce the location of the team that beat Missouri in the NCAA tournament in 2012? I would say Norfolk State.
I would say Norfolk, but in Nebraska, there's a town spelled the same.
Yeah.
And you pronounce it Norfolk.
No. There is no R. I mean, there is, but no second R.
Nah, I know.
No.
I'm just telling you what they told me.
Nebraska,
man.
come on.
Norfolk.
No. Illinois has got a ton of those. Names of cities from the rest of the world that are pronounced completely differently. Marseille, France, beautiful place. Love Marseille.
Mm-hmm.
Marseille, Illinois.
Sure.
Cairo is actually Cairo.
Cairo, yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
The proper French, it would not be pronounced DeKalb. I'll tell you that much. where Northern Illinois is. So yeah, it's there's a lot of those in Illinois.
See,
Peru.
It's funny. It's DeKalb in Illinois, but like in Georgia, it's decab.
Yeah.
It's silent L.
Isn't English great? What a great language. Boise would be Boise in French.
Sure.
Forest.
Boise, soft S.
Yeah, I guess I have a hard ass. Boise, Boize.
Most people do, but I think like if you're from there, it's a soft S. It's Boise.
That's fair.
Kind of like, how people get Louisville wrong.
Yeah. Louisville.
Yeah, we say Louisville, they say Louisville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the southern accent in like Tennessee, Kentucky, because you really do make like a 4-syllable word like 1.5 syllables. It's awesome.
Or sometimes you make a 2-syllable word 5 syllables.
How do you say sherbet?
I have the second R in it. I've always referred to it as sherbet.
Damn it. We're gonna fight about this coming up at the break. Anywho, the Kansas City Royals. Awesome game last night.
Yeah.
Singer.
That was fun.
Fine. The Royals, I had this stat. This was from, I didn't have it. Dave Holtzman had it, the Royals statistician extraordinaire for Royals TV. The Royals became, last night, the first team ever at Fenway Park, 112 years, home or away, first team ever to have a 3-home run, 6 stolen base game. It was the ultimate power speed game. They were slugging. They were sprinting on the base paths. It was awesome. That, honestly, from start to finish, that's probably in the running for one of the most fun Royals wins of the year.
Absolutely. Like, those are fun plays, home runs and stolen bases. Like, as a general rule, those plays are awesome. And they also add to it, got a good, solid pitching performance again from Brady Singer, who works into the 7th, 6 2/3, evens up his record for the year at 8-8. Again, not overpowering, but solid. Didn't walk a lot of guys. I thought was just really solid outing from Brady Singer last night as he continues to lower his earned run average down to 505 for the year after last night's outing. And then, the long ball. Drew Waters was first, ding-da-dong off our guy Cutter with a K Crawford in the 4th inning.
Good.
MJ Melendez broke it open with his 2-run shot off of Rockies cast off to Nelson Lamet. Like, I know the Red Sox are theoretically in striking distance for a playoff berth. They're 5 out of a wild card spot right now in the American League East. If you're running Rockies cast-offs out of your bullpen at this stage of the season, I'm sorry, you're bad. You're a bad team. And then the dinger by Michael Massey, his 10th of the year, a long 2-run homer that curved around the pesky pole and right to really finish things off. So, fun night at the Yard. And we bring up Waters, Melendez, and Massey because those have been 3 of the hottest sticks for the Royals since the break.
And with that, it brings us to our question about whether or not these hot stretches are real for these 3 guys. So we've got the stats here for you for Melendez, Massey, and Waters and what they have done since the break, courtesy of the best website on earth, Baseball Reference. Let's start with MJ Melendez because I think that is probably the piece that I don't want to say the future hinges on, but that's one of the guys you were hoping was going to be a core piece at some position for this team. Since the All-Star break, he's had 93 plate appearances entering today. He's batting .271, .333 on base percentage, .482 slugs. He's over at 800 OPS. What would that be? .815 OPS since the All-Star break. He's had 4 home runs. He's striking out 23.7% of the time, a little under a quarter, and his walk rate 7.5% of the time. That strikeout rate is down almost 7 percentage points. That has gone down sizably. You'd love to get it even lower, but beggars can't be choosers. That's what I've said a lot with the Royals this year. You'll take a number at just under 24, well under a quarter, when you were looking at striking out a third of the time going into the All-Star break. So you'll take that. Walk rate is also a little bit down, but if he was around 10% or so going into the break. But hey, if you're getting on base because you're hitting the ball instead of walking, fine. We will live with it. So for Melendez, the guy who showed plenty of promise, if not a lot of consistency last year, and just, not to be mean, but sucked for a lot of the first half of this season. He's still at minus 1.2 wins above replacement this year. Not great.
A lot of that is defense.
Yeah, that's true too.
A lot of that is defense.
That's pretty brutal. How real is it? Does this feel like something that Melendez, because honestly, you look at that stat line, I don't know about 482 slug, but honestly, you look at that and you say, this is ideally probably what he should be.
So we've talked about Melendez this year in relation to how disappointing the first half of his season was,
Mm-hmm.
and said that the results don't really match all the bright red numbers that you see when you look at his baseball savant page. Particularly when it comes to, he's in the 97th percentile in all of baseball in average exit velocity. So he hits the ball harder than all but like 3% of guys. And he hits the ball hard more often than all but 6% of players. He's in the 94th percentile in hard hit percentage. So when MJ Melendez makes contact, he hits the ball hard. That home run he hit last night, that was a big boy bomb. You are a left-handed hitter and you hit the ball over that part of the monster. Like, that's where David Ortiz would hit him. Like that's the kind of pop you're talking about from the left side. If you're a left-handed batter and that's where you hit the ball out at Fenway Park, buddy, that's impressive. So there are batted ball metrics that suggest that this is what MJ Melendez is capable of. The problem for him this year, and we've said it kind of ad nauseum, is the strikeouts have been too high. Last year, he struck out 24.5% of the time. This year, that's up a full 4%, while his walks have dropped 3%. And that is what has made him a less productive player, because it's wonderful if you hit the ball hard and you hit the ball, hard on a line frequently. That's great. But if you're not making enough contact, then you're not able to translate all those hard hit balls into production, into hits, into extra base hits, into home runs. So the fact that the Ks are starting to come down a little bit, that is definitely encouraging. That's why I'm inclined to be encouraged by this step in the right direction. And if by the end of the year, his strikeout percentage, his strikeout rate looks a little closer to what it was last year, if he can get it into the mid-20s from the high 20s where it sat for most of the year, if the walk rate can stay around the league average, 9-10%, and he continues to hit the ball hard like this, then I think he can have a really strong finishing kick. The larger question for Melendez is going to be, he has to be such a good offensive player. Probably he has to be a great offensive player.
Yeah.
If he's going to stick in the outfield and be this kind of a defender, because he's one of the worst defenders in baseball. So he better be a great hitter. It's not just enough for him to be good. So that is the question for Melendez, because if he doesn't get to be a great hitter, then you kind of have to DH him if you want to get any value out of him, because you're going to lose value with the glove. And there's a long line for DH at bats right now that I'm not sure he's at the front of. So it better be real for MJ Melendez, but I think there's a little more. I think there's a little validity to this. I'm still a believer that the bat can come around. The question is, can it come around enough to cancel out the defensive frustration?
And I hope it can. And I think he's got that ability in there. But you're right. The DH spot is backed up, because you figure out, is Vinny a first baseman or is he a DH? Is Salvador Perez going to be more of a DH than a catcher in the coming years? And I still believe that he probably should be. The name I will continue to bring up, and I'm not saying MJ is going to be this much of a power hitter, but I will continue to say, can you be Kyle Schwarber, who is a bad outfielder? He's not as bad as he once was, but he is still bad. He's probably in the bottom 15% of outfielders in Major League Baseball. He's not a good fielder, but he mashes. He hits a ton of home runs. He doesn't even hit for as high of an average as Melendez does right now, or at least could. He just mashes home runs, so you keep him in the lineup because he's driving dudes in. If you can be that kind of offensive player, you're going to have a spot, and you can, again, make up for the defense. Your offense generally is more valuable, but it better be this good if you're MJ Melendez. And the Royals have to hope that he can stay this good. Michael Massey next. We're not quite going in alphabetical order here. I think Michael Massey is a fascinating case. So his numbers in this time period: 230 batting average, worst of any of these three. 288 on base percentage, worst of any of these three. 527 slug. That is easily the best of these three. He's got 6 home runs and 80 plate appearances since the break, only striking out 10% of the time, and same walk rate as Melendez, 7.5%. I don't know. I am so solidly in I do not know with Michael Massey, because you can tell me that he's actually got real pop and this is repeatable. And those moments we saw from him in, I want to say it was maybe late May, when he did start to figure things out a little bit. We've seen enough that you can believe he's got this ability over a longer period of time. But also, if you told me that next week he's going to go a combined 0 for 19 at the plate with 1 walk and 5 strikeouts, I'd be like, yeah, no, I get it. That's also probably possible. That was pretty much the entire month of April. I really am in a spot with him where I just do not know what to make of his profile and of his game from a long-term perspective.
So the defense is definitely good enough to justify playing at second base if the bat can be like average.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I might be more in on Massey than any of the guys that we're talking about is because he's been doing it for longer. If you go back to May 3rd, Michael Massey spent the whole first month of the season swinging the bat like John Lester in his prime. If you remember John Lester as an offensive player, and Brendan, as a Cubs fan, I know you do,
mm-hmm.
John Lester may be the worst hitting pitcher of all of them. Like he's
very bad.
He's on the short list.
Yes.
And that's what Michael Massey swung the bat like for like a full month of this season. He was cartoonishly bad, like almost beggared belief how bad Massey was in April. But then the calendar flipped to May. And since May 3rd, Massey's hitting 249 with a 321 on base and a 461 slug. That's a OPS since May 3rd, again, of 782. And for comparison's sake, Bobby Witt Jr.'s OPS this season is 784. So he's hit like Bobby Witt Jr. since May. And obviously, April was super rough, but he's been doing this for a while now. The power is super intriguing. Like he's showing a real pull pop. The defense is good enough. You don't need to hit 300 with no power to be like a plus offensive second baseman. I think that Michael Massey has done this now for longer than Melendez and the guy we're going to talk about next. So I'm more in on his offensive production being for real, that he's at least an average offensive performer at second base with the potential to be a little above average power-wise at the position. And when you add in the quality glove, this is your second baseman of the future for the Kansas City Royals.
Looking at his Baseball Savant page, it's in front of me right now. A lot of the it's not fully controllable because there's so many different variables that go into baseball, but the things like his expected batting average, which is what your batting average theoretically, I'm putting this in layman's terms, but should be based on where you hit the ball, how hard you hit it, etc.
Launch angles, all that stuff.
Above average, well above average. In fact, in the top third of all of baseball in that regard. Expected slugging percentage, which is same principle based on all of those different metrics. What should your slugging percentage be? He's nearly in the top quarter of all of baseball in that. He's above average slightly in average exit velocity, above average by a little bit more in max exit velocity, which for a middle infielder is, you'll live with that. Same spot in percentage of hard hits. How often are you hitting the ball hard off the bat, I guess, is the way to put that. Expected weighted on base, well above average. Barreling the ball at an above average rate. Now he's got to work on, taking a few more walks, chasing pitches a little bit less. But honestly, those underlying numbers are encouraging enough that I'm being swayed toward this is playable. And again, the fielding is great. He's one of the best defensive second basemen in the league right now. By the way, we'll talk about his middle infield counterpart in the 5 o'clock hour and how well he's playing defensively, Bobby Witt Jr. So I can see it with Massey. I think, again, he doesn't need to be great offensively to be playable because of that great up-the-middle defense, but that is encouraging. I didn't know that the positive numbers, you could extrapolate them out that far. That's encouraging. All right, I'll buy in. I'll buy in on Massey. I'm happy with that. The other one we want to get to before our next break is Drew Waters. 242 batting average since the All-Star break. 313 on base, 500 slug. He is in the middle of all three of these players in all three of those statistics. 4 home runs. He's only walked 7 times. That's 8.4% of the time.
The best walk rate of any of the guys we talked about.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Still striking out a bunch. 30% strikeout rate.
The worst strikeout percentage since the break of the 3 that we're discussing.
By quite a bit. Again, playable glove.
It's funny, so I look at Fangraphs defensive metrics, and they have him as a negative performer defensively. And then you go to Baseball Savant, and he's in the 80th percentile, and now it's above average, and 88th percentile in outfielder jump, 94th in arm strength. Like, I think he's a plus defender.
Yeah.
In center or in right field, I think he gives you a plus glove. Some of the other numbers don't maybe agree with that, but that's the thing about defensive metrics. Sometimes you get 2 and they say completely different things about a player.
Again, I don't know. Can I trust him to be an average hitter?
See, here's why I'm not quite in on Drew Waters yet. It has to do with the strikeouts. I've said it a lot about Drew Waters. It keeps coming back to the strikeouts. On the year, Waters is striking out 34.5% of the time. There are only 9 qualified hitters in baseball, like who have qualified for the batting championship. So 3 at-bats per game played for their team. Only 9 qualified hitters in baseball have over a 30% strikeout rate. So you got to be really good, a really good offensive player despite the strikeouts to justify that playing time. I went through and on Fangraphs, I lowered the threshold for at-bats to 200 because plate appearances. Okay. Because Drew Waters has had 206 plate appearances this year. Of players in baseball with at least 200 plate appearances, Drew Waters has the 8th worst strikeout rate in baseball.
Can't have it.
And among hitters with a comparable strikeout rate, 34% or worse, only 5 of them are above average according to Fangraphs metrics, weighted runs created plus. And the ones who are above average do one of 2 things exceptionally well. In the case of Brandon Belt of the Blue Jays and Ryan Noda of the Athletics, who have been above average players despite striking out 34 or more percent of the time this year, they draw a ton of walks. Brandon Belt's walked 15% of the time. Ryan Noda's walked 70% of the time. Drew Waters has walked 6% of the time. That's not going to be a thing that Drew Waters does a whole lot. Never was in the minors. He's not going to draw you 80, 90 walks.
Okay.
The other 3 guys who are above average offensive players despite striking out that much are Joey Gallo of the Twins, Patrick Wisdom of the Cubs, Jose Siri of the Rays. You know what all 3 of those guys do? They hit the ball over the fence.
Yeah.
A lot. Wisdom's got 19 dingers. I think Siri's got 21. And Joey Gallo's Joey Gallo. You don't need me to tell you he hits a bunch of home runs. So it's either big power or big patience to go along with a big strikeout rate is what will make you an above average offensive player. We haven't seen the walk rate, and I don't think we're ever going to see that from Waters. Can we see big power? That is going to be the question for Drew Waters. He hit a home run last night. He's got 7 home runs on the year. That's not nothing for 200 at bats, but it's got to be elite power. It's got to be, he's got to be a 20, 25, 30 home run guy, which is tough enough to be in Kansas City as it is.
Yeah.
I think to be the above average offensive contributor for the long haul that he has been here in the last 2-3 weeks. So I'm not quite there yet with Drew Waters, but if the power continues to develop, because he's the youngest guy now, I think he's the youngest guy. Is he younger than MJ?
That is a great question. I do not have that in front of me.
MJ's 24, Waters is 24. I don't know, like, to the day who's younger, but Massey's 25. He's the oldest of the 3. Waters is a December 98 birthday. Melendez is a November birthday. So technically, Melendez is younger by a month. So, like, again, we're still talking about players who are young enough to make some strides in their careers. And I think we're going to continue to see strides from MJ Melendez because I like the underlying tool set from him. But with Drew Waters, I just think there might be too much swing and miss to say definitively this is a guy that you can pencil into the outfield every single day for the Royals for the next 5 years. I'm not there yet with him. He might just be like remember Drew Stubbs?
Yeah.
Thinking about guys named Drew who played a really good defensive outfield, but struck out a lot. And you couldn't really start him if you were like, you better have a really good lineup around him or you weren't going to be like, he played a lot for a really bad Rockies team in 2013. That's what you need to know about Drew Stubbs. He might be that kind of player. He might just be like, a really good 4th outfielder, which is fine. Look, if that's what the Royals got for a draft pick, essentially, they bought Drew Waters as a prospect last year with some international signing money and a compensatory draft pick. That's a good outcome. That's not bad. I just don't know that I'm thinking, oh, absolutely. Where I write Bobby Witt Jr.'s name in pen, and I write, I think Michael Massey's name is in pen, and Vinny Pasquantino's name is in pen. I'm not ready to write Drew Waters' name in pen yet.
He just feels like so many of the guys who have cycled through the Royals outfield in recent years. And I know I complained about this earlier in the summer, that just plus glove strikes out way too much, not consistently driving in runs enough to really make you feel like this is an established player that we're going to keep around.
But again, like, guys can develop a skill. Guys can grow a skill. Christopher points out in the YouTube comments, Jose Siri coming into this year only had 8 career home runs. And this year he's at 21, I think, for Tampa Bay. Like with a power eruption, like if Drew Waters is a 25 home run a year guy, then absolutely you play him every day. That's a right fielder, because the offensive threshold's a little lower for center field, I think, still. And if you can be a plus glove in center field at Kauffman Stadium, that's super helpful. And the fact that they're playing Waters in right and Isbell in center suggests to me that they don't quite think Waters is. Well, they don't think he's better than Isbell in center field. Like obviously that's that's what they're showing there, or they just prefer the arm that Waters has in right field. But yeah, it could be something that he picks up along the way, but he's gonna have to make more contact to get to it. That's the other thing too. That's the strikeouts have to come down.
One real quick note. This is not really pertinent to the conversation here. I was turning on MLB The Show last night, and as I was turning on the game, I realized, oh, shoot, I have laundry to go fold. So I leave it on. I walk out of the room. I had to fold, small load of laundry, walk back in. If you leave the game on the welcome screen long enough, it starts playing a simulated game. They call it demo mode.
Yes.
And it just, random game pops up. It was automatically playing Mariners versus Royals, and I walked into Kyle Isbell stepping to the plate. I said, absolutely not. I could not grab the controller fast enough. It's like, no. We're not doing this right now. We would love to get your thoughts on these guys. We'll talk a little bit more Royals coming up later, but let us know what you think. Waters, Massey, Melendez, where are you feeling comfort-wise with these guys right now, given how well they've played since the break offensively? Hit us up on the text line, 785-272-9429, or jump into the YouTube comment section. Our channel, as you know, is called Sports on 580 WIBW. Let's get to a break. Today's What Is Wrong With You is up next on 580 Sports Talk. What is wrong with you time here on 580 Sports Talk. Brendan and Dan with you. Our current winner for the week. He is the meth-fueled self-baptizer. The man who, while on meth, was stealing from a church and proceeded to commit one of the sacraments on himself
Yeah.
while in the church.
Went into the baptismal and said he baptized himself. Realized perhaps in the middle that what he was doing is actually considered a sin. One of those pesky 10 commandments.
Yeah.
Thou shalt not steal. So, he thought he'd go ahead and get right with God and his Savior, Jesus Christ, in the interim. Just before he left.
Yeah.
Make sure his soul was cleansed.
Again, as I've said, I understand the logic. I don't think it works that way. I am not the world's foremost biblical scholar, and I could get some things wrong here, but I'm pretty sure this form of baptism is probably not looked upon kindly. But who knows? I am just a one man.
Baptism? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that one counts.
By the way, before we get to today's stories, as always, a reminder that What Is Wrong With You is brought to you by Top City Metal Supply, who cuts the metal you need to your specifications. That saves your time, your money, and your material. Never settle when it comes to metal with Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard. My story for us today, Dan, it is a very simple one. We are headed down to the Villages in Florida, where we meet 46-year-old Bronx, New York native John Witkowski, who has been arrested after stealing sandwiches from a grocery store. The 46-year-old man, who lives in Lady Lake, Florida, to be exact, on Friday, just before 7 p.m., entered the Publix at La Plaza Grande, went to the deli counter, and ordered 3 sub sandwiches. I imagine these were chicken tender pub subs. They were worth a total value of $31.77. The man picked up the sandwiches and walked out of the store, not paying for them. Publix managers then made the police aware that Witkowski appeared to have been involved in 2 previous thefts of sub sandwiches on July 21st and 23rd. Each time, the order totaled exactly $31.77.
Man knows what he likes.
He was caught on surveillance leaving the store without paying for the sandwiches. He is now facing 3 different counts of theft. Like a lot of theft stories that we get on What Is Wrong With You, if you're going to get away with it, then get away. Do not go back to the scene of the crime
Right.
again and again. The fact that he got away with this twice is something of a marvel. But Publix obviously is like, whatever, dude, you took sandwiches, don't do it again. And then you keep going back. You got to know when to hold them and when to fold them, pal.
Obviously there was malice aforethought here, because when you go to a grocery and they got like a deli or something like that, like if you go to like locally here in Topeka, you go to a Dillon's or you go to a Hy-Vee, they've got, the deli, they got, the other food, and you go and you get whatever it is you order. And then, okay, there's obviously not an exchange of cash here. You actually have to go pay for this.
I think it's not a perfect analogy or allegory, but I think back to the guy who stole pills from a pharmacy. And the pharmacy was like, hey, man, just bring them back. And then they kept calling him over and over. They said, we're not going to, if you bring them back today before closing, by end of business, we will not call the police. We will not press charges. We just want back the ED medication that you stole. And this guy was like, nah, I'm keeping it. And then he got arrested. I think of that guy. Come on, you have an out. Just don't go back. Go to a different Publix.
Mm-hmm.
Go to it. What else do they have in Florida? Food Lion. They have Bilo down there. Go somewhere else. But no.
So one time this is when I was living in northeastern Colorado, and I lived walking distance, literally catty corner across the street from my my place of business, the radio station I worked at there.
Mm-hmm.
And across the street from that, across one of the 2 main streets in Sterling, Colorado, was a Philly Express inside a gas station, inside a convenience store. I used to like to go get Philly steak sandwich.
Yeah.
Delicious treat. Get some of those, maybe a bag of chips, maybe an ice cold Coke or cherry Coke from the fountain, and go about my day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one day I went in there and did it on a Saturday. I would get in a routine if I did it on a work day, right? Because I take it back across, and I'd eat it at my desk and finish what I need to finish, whatever. But it was a Saturday. I'm like, man, I could really use this. And anyway, so I go and I put in my order for my sandwich, and I fill up my drink, and I grab my chips, and I'm standing there, and I was talking to the guy at the counter at the sandwich place, And he's making the sandwich, and we're laughing. We're having a good time. He hands me the sandwich. Says, "Have a nice day." I said, "Thanks, man." Walk out, walk across the street, walk across another street, get into my house, sit down at my kitchen table, and realize I did not pay for that sandwich, that drink, or those chips. I forgot because you had you took your ticket and then like your other stuff, and then you went to the front of the store. And I walked right past the counter, and my mind was obviously on something else. And I just forgot to pay. And I'm sitting there like, what do I do? Do I charge this one to the game? Or do I think, for karma's sake, I better go back and pay for this? I went back and I paid for it.
Did they say anything? Like, we were waiting for you?
No, they didn't. They said, "Oh, man, thanks."
Great.
Yeah. So I really could have gotten away with it.
Yeah.
But no, this guy clearly on one. And he was intentionally stealing his three. Definitely the pub subs. Absolutely.
No doubt.
The chicken tender. Iconic sandwich. For my What Is Wrong With You today, we're going to have a visual element to this that our YouTube listeners and viewers will enjoy.
Oh, good.
I'm going to give you a second as I set up the story to perhaps go to youtube.com/@sportson580 or pull it up on your phone and find 580 Sports Talk for today and take a gander at what I will be showing you today. We go to my home state of Lakewood, Colorado, where a driver plowed through the front of a building in a strip mall on Tuesday morning. The front end of a Hyundai Tucson was inside the building at 2099 Wadsworth Boulevard. The crash shattered windows and knocked in the brick, but no one was seriously hurt. One person did suffer a minor injury. Others were able to get out of the way in time. The person was an employee at the business, was attempting to park, and accidentally drove into the office. That is a bummer. This is what the aftermath looked like. I'm going to throw that up there on the screen. I have done a truly terrible Photoshop job to remove the name of the business.
No free ads
to show that person has driven in right through the front of this business. What business, you ask? Time for the reveal. Let's do the reveal.
Da-da-da.
Whoops. Oh man, I saved over the wrong picture. Okay. Give me a second. We're going to put up the real picture.
Oh, man. Dan, what is wrong with you himself
I
here?
did. What is wrong with you myself? There it is for the time being. That is the image of the building that the gentleman, or we actually don't know, gentleman or lady, that they drove through. And so, yeah, that's a bad one. They caught a bad one for sure. What was the building again? We're going to reveal it now on the YouTube stream. It was a driving school. The employee of the driving school, called Learn to Drive, drove through the front of the building while trying to park their car.
Parody is dead because life is too unbelievable to really have satire exist anymore. And what was it, a Hyundai?
Yeah, Hyundai. Yeah, one of those little sportier SUVs.
Yeah, it is right through the front of Learn to Drive.
Learn to Drive, it says on the building with now a hole in it. As Barbara says, that's now a drive-through.
Yeah, no,
now drive-through driving school.
That's true.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Oh, my God. It's just unbelievable, man. That's so funny.
It is one of the all-time great photos. That's one of those you're going to be seeing 20 pictures you can't believe, or it's going to be in slideshows on Facebook 25 years from now.
I'm surprised that it's not already at the bottom of the link to this story, next to stories about you'll never guess what happened to these 14 child celebrities.
Yeah.
One of our favorite additional features of What Is Wrong With You. This is one of the funnier images we've ever had. Is it enough, though, to win today's What Is Wrong With You?
I think it wins today. I don't know, though, because so much of it is the visual component.
Yeah.
I don't know that it beats our meth-fueled self-baptism, which is it's a bit of a mouthful, but you really do need all of that to capture just what exactly that guy was on.
Yeah, you really do. I'm with you. I think this one wins today. We keep the meth-fueled self-baptism for the week. I think the visual aid component, and we love having the YouTube stream because then we can bring these up and they can be a part of it. I think if it's really going to carry a lot of long-term weight, you have to be able to tell the whole story and then have the little edition is the picture.
Right.
Like
The meat suitcase.
The meat suitcase. Yes. We can tell you all about the meat suitcase, and it's incredible on its own. Then we throw up the picture, and it just takes it over the top. This one, I feel like you really need to have the visual for it.
Yes.
So I'm with you. We're going to keep the meth-fueled self-baptism as our winner today in What Is Wrong With You, sponsored by Top City Metal Supply. Metal cut to order when you need it. Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard. After this quick break, we're going to talk a little K-State football and some conference realignment coming up on 580 Sports Talk. Brendan and Dan here with you on 580 Sports Talk. No Wildcat wrap-up today. Had some scheduling conflicts with Tim Fitzgerald. All good. We will reconvene with Fitz coming up next week at this time. But we did have some K-State and some conference realignment notes to get to today. One of them here, and I've got to pull up where this came from, regarding the Pac-12 and also a couple schools from the Pac-12 in particular. I mentioned earlier on in the show, I love Washington State because that is where my wife went to school. That is where she got her bachelor's degree. That is where her dad was a professor for many years. She's got a lot of love for Pullman. I have married into a love of that program and wish the best for them. This is not a great look from their athletic director, Pat Shunn, however, who was asked by former K-State beat writer Greg Woods, now covering WSU athletics, said he asked Pat Shunn if over the last year or two his school had received any invitation to another Power 5 conference. His response, Pat Shunn, the AD of WSU, was, quote, "It's not that simple of a question. We've been committed members of the Pac-12 conference in whatever iteration it was for the past century." You didn't answer the question at all.
No.
This is like an answer to a debate question, like a presidential cable debate question. And this is like, whatever side of the aisle you're on, I'm sure you've watched one of those. And like, you didn't answer that at all. They asked you a question and you talked about something completely different. That's what this was. And that's not good. And I feel so much for that community and that school and that athletic department. I would not feel great if that That's what my AD was saying today.
Meanwhile, in Palo Alto today, we have Kyle Bonagura, who writes for ESPN, wrote a quick piece about some comments from the new Stanford head coach, Troy Taylor, who, if you're not familiar, previously at Sacramento State, took over for David Shaw, who resigned after last year. Obviously, Stanford doesn't have a home right now either. And there's a wow or eyebrow raiser at the end of this article, but we have the quote of the day from Troy Taylor talking about the future of his football program. And he says, we expect to play Power 5 football. That's our intention with this university. I can't imagine anything else. Travel is brought up, particularly in light of the apparent interest, preliminary interest from the ACC, which again, the A stands for Atlantic, and that is not the coast that Stanford is on. Quite the opposite, as it turns out. So, yeah, there's a lot of discussion about travel right now, given the biggest moves in conference realignment of late. This is what Troy Taylor had to say. It's such a football guy answer. I love it so much. I'm okay with traveling. Our guys love playing football, and if you've got to travel a little more, that means when people come to play us, they got to travel. We want to be in a great conference, and we're sure that will happen. The travel, if that happens, is fine. People used to have to come across the country in a covered wagon. It'd take them months, and they'd be completely different people by the time they got there. We get on a plane for 5 hours, 6 hours. That's not the end of the world. You get drinks served to you, some snacks, and it's not that bad. End of quote. That's a little thing called perspective.
Sure. Well, I'm glad Stanford athletes won't die of dysentery. That's nice.
Yeah, they're on the Oregon Trail.
Yeah, that's good.
Nobody's got to fjord any rivers to come and play the Stanford Cardinal these days.
All right, man. Like, look, I have been known at times to be a major football guy too, but then there's this. It's just like, and I guess I get it. Like, hey, I'm good to travel. Let's get the best package we can. Let's go. I can respect that. You also don't have to sound like an idiot. Like, you didn't have to say this.
Also, because of how you generally schedule as a football program, you only got to travel at most 5 times a year.
Yeah.
Like, let's think about, your non-revenue sports, how often they have to travel. It's a hell of a lot more than 5 times a year. They got to go somewhere to play.
Yeah.
And when those somewheres are not, down the road at Berkeley or, down the PCH to Los Angeles, and instead are to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, or Miami, Florida, then yeah, I understand there being some consternation about the travel amongst other sports. The part that's interesting about this article, though, from ESPN.com is the final sentence. Stanford expects some kind of resolution by the end of the week. Sources told ESPN.
That makes me think it is going to be the ACC, honestly.
Yeah.
Or independence. And this is for a different day, and we're really ramping up the football coverage, so we don't have a lot of segments open for just like, hey, what is about this random thought piece I had? But I think like 2036, when the ACC creative rights expires, or honestly, maybe before that, I think we're going to have a new wave of independence. I do think there is going to be a resurgence of schools saying, what if we just negotiated our own TV contract?
It's not a bad idea if you can get $50 million a year for your TV rights like Notre Dame can. Stanford can't do that.
No, Stanford definitely can't. But like
I don't think Florida State can do that.
I was going to say, I wonder what the number would be for a Florida State.
Not $50 million. No way.
Yeah, not 50. I would agree with that.
But like,
I wonder what their threshold would be.
Yeah.
To be able to have that much autonomy.
Yeah, to be able to try and make it work that way. I don't know. Like, what other programs get 50, 60 million a year from the networks to go independent?
Bama.
Yeah, probably some SEC programs could. Maybe Texas.
Texas. Yeah.
Texas.
USC.
What if they just gone independent in the first damn place instead of playing havoc with the future of the Big 12?
That would have been nice. That would have been nice for sure.
Yeah.
By the way, one final note here. This from John Urand, among other places, writing in the Sports Business Journal, and Jeff Fuller of ESPN 960 in Salt Lake City, putting this all together as well on Twitter. 5 different media companies and how interested they were in the Pac-12. Amazon never submitted a bid. NBC reached out 3 times, never submitted a bid. Fox was offering less than $4 million per team for 13 football games. CBS wanted 5 basketball games, never made an offer. And ESPN was offering $9 million a school. That's it. Not looking good for the Pac-4 schools remaining. We've got half an hour left of 580 Sports Talk next. to go on 580 Sports Talk. Brendan Dworzinski, Dan Lucero here with you up until 5:30 today on the Sports Voice of Kansas and on YouTube at Sports on 580 WIBW. Royals baseball versus the Red Sox pregame for Game 3 of the series coming up at 5:30. First pitch at 6:10. We will talk a little bit about this matchup and a great stat on Bobby Witt Jr. here in just a moment. And of course, at 5:15, we will talk to the voice of the Chiefs, the award-winning voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Holthus, for our daily training camp report with Mitch, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Azura Credit Union, talking about Trent McDuffie today. We'll still take your texts through the end of our shortened show. 785-272-9429 is the text line number. YouTube comment section can be found again on our channel, which is called Sports on 580 WIBW.
Can I just point out this incredibly correct text that we got earlier in the program today from the 785? We were talking about the Royals earlier in the show. Obviously, the Royals defeated the Red Sox last night. We got a text that simply read, "Do not like yellow unis."
Good take.
Great take. If you watched the Red Sox last night, I don't know if they were the first team with a City Connect jersey from Nike or if they were just one of the first.
Yeah, they were in the first wave for sure.
But they've got that Boston Marathon inspired jersey with the yellow top and the blue hat. And they look like the UCLA Bruins. And I like UCLA's uniforms because they're UCLA's uniforms. They're not the Boston Red Sox uniforms. If you're the Red Sox and you have any red in your uniform, please get out of my face. Like, I hate those more than there are a lot of really bad City Connect jerseys. Any of those jerseys with black or dark blue pants is an affront to God. But I really do think the worst ones might be Boston's because there's no team color there. Like, you don't have any of your team colors at all. It's ridiculous.
It's very bad. Again, I want to touch on the Royals here briefly, but also we were talking realignment at the end of last hour. I am intrigued by this. This is from Larry Williams, who is the publisher of, or a writer for, TigerIllustrated.com. That is Clemson's rivals website. I do not know who Larry Williams is. I do not know how reputable he is. I do know that his profile picture on Twitter is Baby Billy from the Righteous Gemstones performing There Will Be a Payday. So I'm going to trust him in single thing he says.
Yes, sources follow him. Like Brett McMurphy follows him. Andy Staples follows him. Like people who break news follow this guy. So he must have some credibility.
He tweeted out a little bit earlier today, and I just saw this. I am told that Notre Dame, as a full voting member of the ACC, is pushing hard for the additions of Stanford and Cal. That full voting member part is ... something. And to be honest with you, I agree. I don't know what the inner workings are like because I know Notre Dame is in the ACC for everything but football, but I kind of feel like you shouldn't be able to have your cake and eat it too. This might be something we talk about on tomorrow's show a little bit more in depth, but that feels to me like Notre Dame just play a full ACC schedule.
Right. At that point, just join a conference.
Yeah. And I don't know.
Especially because they play Stanford just about every year anyway.
Right. And to me, I would just say, hey, look, you're either in or you're out, and you got to pick one. If you want to be independent, fine, but you don't get a vote anymore. That is interesting. And that, again, leads me to believe Stanford and Cal are going to end up in the ACC, which is going to be so bad for so many non-football athletes, but we'll get to that more later on in the week. The Royal stat that I've been teasing, that again came from Dave Holtzman, Royal statistician extraordinaire, that he put on Twitter last night, or it's actually this morning that this popped up on Twitter. Bobby Witt Jr. has all the tools to be a good defender. We talked about that from the very beginning with him, right? That you can see it in him with the speed, with the athleticism, the arm, everything. He's got the tools to be a really good fielding player. Well, according to the outs above average statistic, you can find that at Baseball Savant, nobody has more outs above average at any position in Major League Baseball right now than Royal shortstop Bobby Witt Jr. This guy should be considered for a Gold Glove or should be a favorite at shortstop for the Gold Glove. By the way, the only other shortstop that is in the top, 7 in all of baseball, Dansby Swanson of the Chicago Cubs. And I'm not just saying this because he's a Cub and I have come to love him over the last 4 months. He is an incredible defensive player.
Mhm.
Truly, truly incredible.
It's also interesting that Michael Garcia is on this list.
It
11
is.
outs above average at his secondary position. Like he didn't come up as a third baseman. If that's the kind of run prevention you're getting from the left side of your infield, that's going to help your pitching staff in the long run.
Big time. Big time.
Especially get some ground ball guys and quit throwing money at fly ball guys like Jordan Lyles.
Speaking of Jordan Lyles, he's on the bump tonight for the Kansas City Royals. Hey, he's got the ERA down to 6.24.
He's been just bad the last 2 months.
We'll take that.
A change from atrocious.
Nice.
Like it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Good stuff. We will definitely take that.
Maybe they'll hit 3 more dingers behind him tonight and win another ball game.
Nick Pivetta goes to the Red Sox. He hasn't been great. Better than Lyles, but not great. Jordan Lyles, by the way, he has won, 3 of his last 5 decisions? Did he get to 0-11?
He was 0-11.
Okay, so he has now won 3 of his last 4 decisions.
How about that?
Nothing to say about the actual game results in all of those starts, but still, he's improving. We can appreciate that. Any chance the Royals recapture some of that magic from last night?
Why not? Swinging the bat's good. They're swinging the bats with a lot of confidence right now. No reason they can't do that with Pivetta. They just gotta. He's a big strikeout guy. They gotta grind out some at bats out of him, get him out of the game early, get to that terrible Red Sox bullpen.
The reason why I am really hoping for some more Royal success here at the back end of the season, I don't know if you recall this, but if we want to go all the way back to late March, one of the last days before the season started, we did a segment about our bold predictions for the season, all of Major League Baseball and specifically for the Kansas City Royals. And one of mine was that in the month of September, the Royals will have a winning record. Not an overall winning record at some point in September, but from September 1 through September 30, and I guess throw in the 1 game in October too, the Royals will have a winning record. Now, the schedule does not line up especially favorably the Red Sox might still be fighting for a wild card. The Blue Jays fighting for the playoffs. The Astros, same thing. The Guardians, same thing. But they do get to play 6 against the White Sox, 3 against the Tigers, and 3 against the Yankees. So it's doable.
Yeah.
It is absolutely doable.
Could go 6-0 against the White Sox.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
That's a trash fire right now.
Yeah. I've never been in a major league clubhouse. I have been, high school locker rooms. That's as high as I ever played competitively. But generally, I would believe, even with that lack of experience in the big leagues, I would believe that if you've got players slapping each other and admitting openly that you just don't want to play in games before you get a week off and just say, I'm leaving, and then you're the one who ends up slapping someone who tells you off, that to me says maybe your culture is not very great. That's just a thought.
Probably something to that.
We've also got some old guy beef. Ozzie Guillen, former White Sox manager, mad at current White Sox manager and former Royals bench coach Pedro Grifol.
Everything is going great.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I would not be entirely shocked if this is it for Pedro Grifol.
Yeah, he may. I feel bad for him.
Yeah, I do too.
He's had looks at this opportunity for a long time, and this might be the only one he ever gets because it's not going well.
No, going about as poorly as possible. The best thing possible for Sports Talk Radio is when Mitch Holthus joins us, and he's going to do that next as we wrap up 580 Sports Talk with our training camp report after this. 580 Sports Talk. It's that time again, our Chiefs training camp report with the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, Mitch Holthus, here on 580 Sports Talk. And as always, our training camp reports with Mitch are brought to you by Hy-Vee and Azure Credit Union. Ask Haven Byrne, Crystal Rippey, or Melissa Hunter about using the Credit Union Advantage for your home loan at Azure Credit Union. Mitch, how was the last day of practice before a day off tomorrow?
Well, rainy day, right? We've had every bit of rain we could possibly have. And so chased them inside, but they had a 10-10-10 practice. I think he eased them up. I think Coach Reed's pretty happy where at least the effort he's getting. You can always tell he backs it up a bit. Tomorrow's an off day, and then Friday they really start kind of chomping on the logistics of just being organized for Sunday afternoon. But this kind of ends, I told you, from July 31 to now was the dog days where a lot of days in pads, and just so really a good feeling, I think, overall of what they've got done.
That was
all the way back to the last 2 weeks.
Well, let's continue on with our theme of the week, Mitch, and that is looking at the sophomores on this year's Chiefs roster. Sky Moore yesterday, George Karlaftis to lead things off to start the week. But the first of the first-round picks from last year is our focal point today. It's a guy that our pal Fulton Caster on our earlier show here on the station is a huge fan of. So big of a fan, he bought a jersey of him last year, in fact. And after he came back from that early injury, he was just incredible. Trent McDuffie, the former Washington Husky, great first year with the Chiefs. And I think it's fair to say, Mitch, given how steep the learning curve is usually for first-year cornerbacks in the NFL, there's a whole lot more that McDuffie can do even after kind of lighting the defense on fire in his first year.
So who's the big McDuffie fan that bought his jersey?
That's our pal Fulton, who is one of the hosts with Jake on the earlier show on the station, mic'd up.
Okay, does Fulton have then a McDuffie 21 jersey? Because it's already old. He switched to 22.
He and Jake were actually talking about that, Mitch. I swear not more than 2 weeks ago. Jake was telling him, no, it's cool. Now you've got the vintage one. And I think Fulton eventually came around to it.
You can rationalize anything, Brendan. That's good. He's got the throwback McDuffie jersey
That's right.
in his second year. Actually, Trent McDuffie becomes a very important part of a bigger discussion too, in my opinion, because maybe you're like me and Dan, probably like me and you, they're thinking, well, how do the Chiefs stay on top? How do they get the 12-5 or 13-4, maybe even 14-3 and get the bye? And to me, a big area, and I've alluded to this earlier, is gaining more turnovers, more big defensive plays. An explosive defensive play which turns the game. A Bolton scoop and score to help win Super Bowl 57, which was at least a 10-point swing. The Chiefs last year, Brendan, were 21st in the league in takeaways. They didn't have a great takeaway. They were underwater in the giveaway takeaway ratio for most of the year, and they still went 14-3. So what if you go to +6 or 7, and in that plus flipping, if you will, a couple of big plays? I think a source of several of those big plays will be Trent McDuffie. He looks great in this camp. Faster, more instinctive. They move him around. He's good in the slot. He can recover, like they've got him beat on a route, and then he's got that knack, the great ones do, to be able to recover, and not only recover, make a play. And sometimes that's a sneaky big play where the quarterback thinks he's got something, and then all of a sudden a superb defensive back, Patrick Surtain of Denver, is this same way. Is there and actually jumps the route and makes the play. So McDuffie, to me, I talked to Trent McDuffie. Is that a thing this team has to do to make the jump? And he's all about it.
Man, that's that was one of the big things that we need to do this year is turnovers. I know last year we didn't have as many turnovers as we would like, and so this year not only turnovers but scoring on defense. I feel like you score on defense, that can change the entire game, and that's been a big part of what we're doing out here each and every day. Honestly, the big difference is just having that confidence, coming off a Super Bowl win as rookies, being a part of a defense that was new. And knowing that we made it all the way, that we won, we did the big thing. coming into this year, I feel like just the confidence and the overall just communication and just the whole defense is gelling. And it's really nice to play with a bunch of guys who are all on the same page because you can do a lot different things within the system that we weren't doing last year.
I just think this team's built, and with these first-year guys going to their second year, they're more confident. They're quicker, a little more, using more of their instinct. And I get excited with Trent McDuffie winning a game with the pick six.
Mitch, Trent comes off as a really smart guy. Like, you hear him speak and you just feel like, yeah, this dude knows what's up. He's obviously smart in the game, and all the great ones are. Like, you think of, Charles Woodson, brilliant football mind. Darrelle Revis, so smart. That's safeties, corners, all the defensive backs. And McDuffie expresses himself like a very smart guy. Did you pick up on that quickly in, when you first met him last year and now as he enters year two as well?
Yeah, I mentioned, I think last year when I met these guys the very first night after they were drafted, I got to talk to them the next day, basically. I thought, oh my gosh, I would hire this guy right now for my company. And I think that you would feel the same way. McDuffie's so smart. I mean, he's not only football smart, he's like smart. And this year, in fact, in the springtime, we took, I always do a big fundraiser in Smith Center, my hometown, for the Home on the Range cabin and for the grounds. And he came this year along with Trey Smith. And those two guys were phenomenal. I mean, Trent McDuffie could be commissioner of the NFL someday or head of the NFLPA. He's that bright. And he's charming. Like, he'll win over a room. If watch him just turn into a Pro Bowl player making big-time plays. And that's what I think is ahead of him. And what I'm seeing in this camp is validating those thoughts.
Mitch Holthus is our guest, the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, joining us for a training camp report brought to you by Hy-Vee and Azura Credit Union here on 580 Sports Talk. Mitch, the growth of the secondary, I thought, was maybe the biggest story of the second half and the playoff run of the Chiefs last year. One of the biggest for sure. It's a growth. It was a growth as a unit, and it was the growth of a lot of second-year or first-year guys who are now second-year guys, Trent McDuffie being one of them. With all of those young defensive backs having come in together, not just McDuffie, but Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams, before his injury earlier in the camp, Najee Johnson, Brian Cook at the safety spot. Is there, do you notice, maybe a camaraderie in that position group that can only be forged by the fact that all of these guys had to learn on the fly, and all of them have gone through a lot of the same things that you go through as an NFL player, but they've done it together as a unit? That's really rare for that many guys at the same position to be first-year contributors like that.
We've had our first episode of the franchise. I don't know if you guys saw it. People can, it's easy. They can just go to YouTube and search it. But they're featured, the so-called Fab Five. These guys, to answer your question, hit it off before they even stepped on the field. It was honestly during their rookie mini camp, and I'd have to research to see how many of them even knew each other before they got here. But they have their own little fraternity, and it's pretty spectacular and cool to see it. You'll really see it when you watch the franchise. Now, what's sad is that was done before Najee's injury. And when Najee tore his ACL, that now the Fab Five got reduced by one. But now I'm throwing some other guys this year. Tamari Connor could join this fraternity. So could Nick Jones, the 7th-round pick out of Ball State. But your question is a good one, and my answer is that it was almost immediate. There was connection. Again, they were super smart, all of them. Are super smart. Two was their emotional and mental maturity. But I think the fact that they could all be on kind of the same plane in discussions and how they viewed the world and how they viewed the start of their career, and because they were these kindred, band of brothers before they even met each other in a way, is really very interesting and unique. But they have a very strong chemistry on and off the field, the so-called Fab Five. And now you throw in some other young guys to join them, and it gets exciting to see what it could become.
Mitch, what do you make of McDuffie's versatility in the secondary? Because we know if you're going to play for the Chiefs defense, you better be able to do a whole bunch of different things. And, you look at L'Jarius Sneed, who's been kind of the poster boy for this for a few years, that he can play in the slot. You can have him play zone coverage on the back end. You can man him up on the outside. He'll find success. A blitzer, obviously, he's stellar at doing that. The safeties for the Chiefs for years have been able to do a bunch of different things. When it comes to, and even the draft picks this year, you mentioned Shamari Connor, who that was kind of his big thing. He can play special teams and he can do whatever you ask of him on the back end defensively. Where do you think Trent McDuffie kind of slots in? Are you looking at him as, hey, he's going to be great on the boundary and that's just his thing? Or does Steve Spagnuolo and the rest of that defense trust him to be able to maybe play a little safety in a pinch, maybe play on the inside a little bit?
He could because of his intelligence. Now, where he's been most of his camp because of the injury, rehab, the knee inflammation that L'Jarius Sneed is dealing with, Trent's been in the slot a lot, and he's been really good in the slot a lot. And, that becomes a blitzing position. You mentioned Sneed's so good at it. Sneed is good because it almost gives the Chiefs an edge rusher in that role. DBs will come on a slot blitz, but they don't have the target point. They don't have the physicality. They don't have it's almost like Sneed studied edge rushers to be so good at it. Now, Trent, smaller than Sneed, is still physical enough to be a solid blitzer, physical play, explosive athlete. You have to also play the run because you're asking about the versatility. Yes, he could play safety. He could play outside right, outside left, slot right, slot left. That's, he fits or checks all the boxes. I'm talking Trent McDuffie. But he's a little more physical than you think. These DBs all tackle well. That's what has been underrated about him. There's not a poor tackler in the bunch. And even though McDuffie's on the smaller side of the Fab Five, he's more physical than you think. So, yes, check all the boxes. He can play a lot of things.
All right, Mitch, who are we going to hear about tomorrow on the show?
You already talked about him. Brian Cook enters this whole discussion because Spags let the cat out of the bag the other day of where I was going to go because a lot has been on his plate. He now becomes, in many ways, a leader at the safety position. You're like a catcher in baseball because everything's in front of you if you're the deep safety. And Cook can play in the box, but he's wicked smart. Made the big play against Cincinnati last year in the AFC Championship game. He's ascending. So we're going Brian Cook tomorrow because he's the one guy people don't talk about as much, and they should, among the Fab Five.
Yeah, Dan and I are both huge fans of Brian Cook's game, so we are both looking forward to that tomorrow on our Chiefs Training Camp Report with Mitch Holthus, the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, brought to you, as always, by Hy-Vee and Azura Credit Union. Mitch, we appreciate the time, my friend. We'll talk to you tomorrow at this time.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you tomorrow.
The best of the best. Mitch Holthus joining us for our Chiefs Training Camp Report today. Want to get to a quick final word?
One more thing. In conclusion, you better wrap it up.
Take us away.
Michael Massey's the second baseman of the future for the Kansas City Royals. Believe it. He's got the glove. He's got some pop. He has hit like Bobby Witt Jr.'s hit all year since May. April was the aberration. May through now, that's the real Michael Massey. He's a big leaguer.
The Chiefs have a good problem, a problem that good teams want to have in camp. A ton of talented, hungry skill position players and only so many spaces you can fit them in. I don't know who's going to make the roster, but it's going to be a fun battle all the way until opening week. That does it for 580 Sports Talk. Royals baseball's up next. We're back tomorrow at 3 o'clock. For Dan Lucero, I'm Brendan Dworzinski. This is 580 Sports Talk.